let's get started. Cool. All right. Welcome everyone to my YouTube channel. Today we are exploring a very special topic from analytics perspective. Joining us is a global analytics director who will share his invaluable insights about analytics. So welcome Nick to my YouTube channel. For those who don't know, Nick is identified as an Alteryx Ace. Alteryx Ace is nothing but Alteryx associate. Who is recognized for their exceptional knowledge and skills into analytics and Alteryx as well. So first of all, thanks, Nick, for accepting my invite. Good to see you. Looking forward for this conversation about your perspective about analytics, how the industry is changing. Looking forward for that dialogue as well. So what I'll do is I'm going to divide this session into three parts. First of all, we'll have your introduction. I've got a few questions to cover up as well. And in case we have got some follow-up communications or questions, we'll take that one as well. Okay, I'll share my screen now.
Great. Cool.
All right. So this is the first slide about Nick. Okay.
There's me with with a little less gray hair these days. A little more gray hair these days, but that's me.
All right, cool. So yeah, Nick, let's get started with your bit of introduction, background, how you got into this analytics field. Yeah, please share your background knowledge about analytics as well.
Yeah, Chaitanya. Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me, sir. Good to see you again. How did I get into analytics? I did a hour-long Zoom, I think, that folks could probably find on YouTube about kind of how to get into analytics, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Maybe there's some more hot takes on that front. But the way I got into analytics was, I was a finance and econ major. I'm not even confident my college had computer science in terms of an option to pursue. This is way back in the day where I had to teach some of my classmates Excel and pivot tables and whatnot. So I was a little ahead of my time with that, which no one would probably give me too many kudos these days for knowing that. But I got into advertising after graduation, and I won't go through all the details, but Excel guru, and then getting into pivot tables, and then starting to teach myself some VBA to automate some boring processes. And then I found that I wanted a lot more data, so I taught myself SQL. And then finally I got my hands on a Tableau license from my marketing department, and I was like, okay, this is really fun. I want to make this not 10% of my job. I want to make this 100% of my job. So I pursued, trying to upskill in that. I found that a lot of the data that I wanted to work with wasn't in a format that I wanted. It wasn't enriched with other data from another spot. And I found all that kind of stuff out when I was at a bank after the ad agency. So I found Alteryx after that. And that's when I really found that, the analytics engineering component of analytics was something I was really passionate about, like enabling other folks to, automate their processes, to get to their answers faster, to enable the data visualization experts to visualize their things, to empower the data scientists to pursue what they needed to do and use the data that they needed, was something I was really passionate about. So that's how I got into it. And then I wanted to help other people do that in other different industries. So I thought consulting, as a data consultant, the data engineer, or in the engineering space, would be quite a great fit. So that's where I landed, and happy I made that choice.
Cool, cool. It all started from Excel, VBA automation to now
absolutely.
Alteryx.
You got it. You got it.
So a great leap of technology chain as well as you were writing your career journey.
Absolutely. Hey, still the #1 BI tool in the world, some may argue, Microsoft Excel. So it's exactly. I understand the pain of Excel hell just as much as I understand, I think, the niceness of the Alteryxes of the world, and other platforms, of course, as well.
Absolutely. So it is great story, Nick. I mean, to start from the exact base of the data where normally people would use Excel for understanding and cross-tab. People still consume Excel, right? Even though they're using BI tool, still they want to download the data in Excel and just go through that
every day
data grind as well. So that's definitely a fascinating thing to see your journey that way. So next thing I would like to understand about what is about this analytics? You mentioned about you got passionate about data analytics through use of tools like Tableau, and then your passion got more ramped up with Alteryx as well. What exactly fascinates you? What I mean, is it the storytelling ability? Is it the impact that your thought process, the creativity that makes you fascinate about analytics? What exactly is the core fundamentals?
Yeah, I think initially it was about how impressed I was with Tableau and how beautiful data could be. I mean, truly, that was like something like a light bulb, a career light bulb went off when I first started using Tableau. Is like, oh, this is how we can quickly understand our data. Oh, here we can leverage pre-attentive data attributes to, highlight things we otherwise wouldn't notice or understand around the data. And getting into that community,
Yeah,
that was really something. On the day-to-day side, the reason I really like, workflow automations, which, people leverage KNIME, people leverage Matillion, Dataiku. There's a number of platforms out there that
yeah,
help to automate the data processing component of
yeah.
the whole analytics aspect. And that's why I felt so passionate about that is I felt like that piece was such a blocker for so many people, especially on the business side. So a lot of
Okay,
times when we're looking at the ecosystem of technology at a company, there's these silos everywhere, but let's call them, there's this big group of IT, and then there's the business over here, and it's always the struggle in the in between. And I feel like the in between there is where analytics engineering thrives. There's articles out there this year which Gartner's highlighting this concept of fusion teams, which has been enabling a lot of folks in the business to have analytics engineers embedded within certain business and department functions, and they're leveraging also technology like dbt with that, which actually coined the phrase analytics engineering. I think whatever platform, whatever tool you want to use for that in between space, if you can move from very siloed requests and opening up a ServiceNow ticket and then waiting 9 months to actually get a table where then or a view where then you just have to say, oh, we're missing a couple of columns and wait another 3 months for that column to appear. If you can accelerate that process, and we
gotcha.
have, that's what I'm very passionate about now. You
Okay,
can you can be surprised about what people can actually build using low and no code platforms like the ones I've mentioned
yeah,
before
yeah.
in the business. Like they need a certain aspect of data fluency to be able to do that successfully. But once you arm them with that, once you arm them with an analytics engineer to accelerate what they need to build from a reporting perspective or what have you, it's really great to see. It's really rewarding to see folks in the business get to spend all their time on explaining why something happened and not spend their entire careers on just explaining what happened at the end of the day.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Makes sense. So it's more about like rapid analytics or rapid analytics engineering with the help of these tools, low code tools
Mhm.
that makes the
Absolutely.
things moving on rather than like piling up the queue in the some BI global team and making those changes implemented for the team. So it's getting into the nitty gritty very quickly with this help of these tools as well. So that's something helps us. Definitely, I can relate with you because when I started using Tableau, I was
Hmm.
literally in love because I was being given two options back then.
Hmm.
Choose Power
Yeah,
BI or Tableau. I'm not gonna be a bias or compare Power BI Tableau, but I felt within the love of this tool and the community
totally.
because few of the common friends right in the community who actually
Hmm.
helped each and every other community members to come up as well. So that also
That's right.
boosts your confidence. Yes, I can achieve something, and that becomes your passion over the period of time. So I'm able to relate
Absolutely.
what you mentioned about that pointer.
That's
Sure
right.
thing.
And all the folks in the community, I mean, if you talk about Tableau, and I haven't mentioned Power BI, I'm glad you did. I mean, there's so many folks in that community and Microsoft community in general that are just so willing and able to help folks that are getting into it, whether it's, week one of them in that platform or year
Yeah.
10, if you have a question, you can put it on the forums or, if you can even reach out to folks, I think. And if it's from Power Automate, if it's from Tableau Prep to anything in between in terms of the data visualization aspect of those platforms too, everyone's
Yeah.
so willing to and passionate to help each other, which
Yeah.
is just great.
Correct, exactly. No, these like-minded people is, I guess, what turns your career into passion. I believe that's
Absolutely,
that's
yeah, you
what
got it.
analytics has. Why if it is effective these many days, right? It is the core one of the value to bring many folks turn into this core analysis of data. Cool.
Definitely,
Nice, nice. Definitely. This should help my viewers to understand why analytics is so interesting to do at the same time, why you can feel that connect on daily basis. It's just not at the workplace, but at the community forums as well. Perfect. Makes
Yeah,
sense. Absolutely.
you
All
got it.
right. I wanted to understand one more thing from you. What
Yeah.
important factors do you consider while developing any analytic strategies? I know you must be interacting with many folks around the industries. People might be trying to understand. They want to have now analytic strategies been developed within their organizations. What
Yep.
important factors do you see if someone is trying to understand? Let's say a new business is trying to open their new account in their organization about analytics. What should be the important factors they should consider?
Yeah, you got it. Folks are going to be disappointed to hear. I shouldn't say, I won't say AI, and just leave it at that. No, that'd be a good entry point to get into any conversation in 2024. But in reality, none of that stuff even matters unless you have good data. So we got to start in terms of like looking at, a discovery about where are folks at today with their data journey, with their digitalization efforts, however you want to phrase it. What part of the data maturity curve, or again, insert buzzword there, are they on? And I do think that's really important to understand that, because you can't start with AI and work backwards. I mean, you should start with a problem and then figure out a solution from there. In terms of, I'm reading this now here, what important factors are considered in developing analytics strategy. What we like to do, and what I've been a part of in terms of my projects, is understand where folks are at and meeting them where they're at. Of course, we can come in with the technologies and platforms that we'd recommend out of the gate for data visualization, or to have. And let me just work backwards. A data visualization tool, or from an analytics engineering perspective, maybe we recommend DBT if they or we have some folks that are familiar with SQL. And from a warehouse perspective, Snowflake would be a good option on that front, for example. So we have a modern data stack, stack that we can go to the customer and recommend if they're starting net new. And maybe they have a couple of these platforms or tools already. So maybe we just see what we need to augment their current stack with to make them most successful. Also, we gotta look at where they're storing their data. So if they're storing everything in Excel, then we should really start with getting something centralized in a database, out of the gate, building a reporting mart or whatever you want to phrase it as, and then build some solutions from there. Build some data procs on top of that stuff once we have a good ecosystem. But we don't have to go through the entirety of that process before we get value and results. I think we can, and we've done, in the past, is the approach being let's work on this, but there's also avenues or paths, however you want to think of it as, to rapidly prototype, as you mentioned earlier, rapidly prototype solutions, so that when the data in the warehouse is there, and has been built, now we have our data visualization, maybe a dashboard built on top of a data set that's curated and enriched and beautiful. But maybe today someone's having to press that workflow button every single day, or maybe it's scheduled. But ideally, IT is like, all right, we need to have this readily available. We need to have this, backed up. We want load balancers behind this stuff. Let's make sure now we can, productionalize, even though this would probably be considered productionalized. But let's say we want to productionalize it, so we want to have it IT owning that. And that's great, because now we already have the data set established by the business of what they need. Hopefully, we have some business logic that's documented around that, and we can pass that back and not go through this whole in between process, wasting a lot of folks' time. It's already there. We already have it built. Let's translate that to SQL now, so we can actually have some good IT resourcing behind that thing. And that that's one path. There's also paths where people are all the way over here and they just need help building data visualizations on top of their data. Maybe they're even beyond that, and they're like, we need to build and we need to model some data to do some training so that we can introduce some churn model or analysis within our business.
Yeah.
And a number of other examples, but there's maybe two examples there for you.
For sure. Okay. Yeah. So the core of any analytics starts from the basic of having your data in your system. According to, maybe it should not be just flat files. It has to be stored in some structured way, unstructured way, at least nowadays.
I think
right?
that's the goal. I mean, of course, levels of businesses globally, definitely run on Excel, and disparate data and flat files. But ideally, we're taking them forward to a more mature state. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't have to be, only that direction. There can be certain pockets where you're still adding value and building things while you go on that journey, I think, too. So I think it can be.
Correct. Exactly. So it's all about identifying your needs, what exactly it can't be just one stop, right? It has to be a hybrid based on their individual needs, whether they
I
want to
think
keep
so.
it on premise or on cloud,
Mhm.
whether they want to store in this databases or different. And then comes the analytics part, which will actually be a more impactful analysis showcasing to solve the business problems. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Ideally, we stop the company and we introduce all the beautiful, perfect, this data stack and say, all right, we're ready to get back to
Yeah,
work. But the reality is we still got to keep the business operating and running. So we still can make that stuff semi-automated or better while
correct.
we build for the best version of that infrastructure for the future at the same time.
Exactly. So how to cut down the repetitive task with the help of all these automated or analytics tools that we
That
have right now.
Absolutely. And in a lot of cases too, how do we monetize that data too and move towards that direction of not only, cutting costs or saving time on
Yeah,
processing and managing data, but then how do we capitalize that on that data to, reduce churn? And so
yeah,
that's increasing, ARR or, NRR, whatever you want to phrase it as, depending on your industry. But how do we start to think about data or data teams as something that can drive the top line, not just something that can reduce costs too, I think is a super, super important uh,
absolutely.
aspect to bring to that.
For sure. Yeah. Companies would definitely want to know what's the return of investment of this, having this tool
Definitely.
onboarded for my
Yeah.
client. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Moving on from, hey, I know this tool costs, let's call it 5K USD for an Alteryx license. That's probably inflated, but let's say it's 5K. Well, I better bring to my boss, 100K of savings, cost savings,
Hmm.
or revenue generating materials so that I can say, hey, I'm going to get a 20x on top of this licensing cost, right? And that's a very, typical conversation. And actually,
Correct.
in my experience, has been very easy to qualify a tool that costs that much because
Yeah.
we can associate with a problem that's 100K of cost or savings or something like that. But I would love to see it. I think it's even better, and I think it's a lot more fun too if you can find a tool or platform that can have a generation of revenue conversation
Yeah.
versus just cutting costs. Because if you can do both,
Exactly.
that's great. But also, it's if you can say I'm going to attribute revenue towards this tool, that's an even better pitch or conversation you're happening with your boss or the CEO or whoever it might be.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's almost like turning the tables in your direction and not just
Yeah,
telling you're going to save this much, but you can also make out of this with this
absolutely.
process. Remembering. Absolutely. Good
Absolutely.
point. Good point to be thought
Yeah.
about. Cool. Really appreciate those insights, Nick. So this will help
Yeah.
anyone who's thinking about onboarding any analytics processes in their organizations, what kind of important factors they might have to consider or at least revisit if they have not put a thought about that. Definitely,
Yeah.
should this help this? Cool. Next,
You got it.
next session is going to be about questions which I've got from few of my viewers as well, which I
Okay.
wanted to ask you.
Hmm.
And maybe if you want, you can share your insights as well, one by one. The
Yeah,
first one is
please.
definitely going to be the hot topic of AI. What
Sure.
impact do you see on this industry of data analytics? Because I've seen
Yeah.
many companies, they have integrated AI, BI all together. Earlier, it was self-service analytics. Now it is now in the hands of the end user itself. They can just type in with this large models and can get some
Hmm.
automated charts been developed for themselves. How do you see
Hmm.
this industry of analytics getting evolving? I don't want to answer from you how it is harming, but I want to understand what's your perspective, how we can evolve with this now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's going to be ever evolving. So I'm going to guess. I'm going to say what I think could be happening because it does change so quickly. Um, how's it evolving? I mean, I see a great company, great platform, KNIME, for example. They're, a lot of times they're in the conversation because someone's talking about Alteryx and KNIME, is a part of that conversation, at least stateside a lot, where it's like, oh, well, KNIME's free. It's open source, from a designer perspective or, what they call the KNIME Analytics platform. One thing I like to highlight on that front is they were pretty early in terms of introducing Kai, so KAI, so 9AI, and
Okay.
one piece there. And Ultrix, they previewed some of this stuff during their kick session last year at their annual conference. But this idea of asking your platform, like
Mm-hmm.
KNIME, like
Mm-hmm.
Ultrix, or like Data IQ or Matillion, what have you, and saying, this is what I need my data to look like. Build me a workflow. I wouldn't even say we're close. I think we're there in terms of being able to do a lot of that pretty accurately with, a couple of minor tweaks. And I say we're there as in like the technology is there to be able to support that type of motion today. Now, how accurate that is, and we got to make sure we have experts checking to make sure the business logic is correct, right? If you're going to be building, a workflow and you're saying, KNIME or Kai, build me a household name data set. Well, you're still going to have to define what a household means, and you're still going
Yeah.
to have to define what a customer means, and you're still going to have to, understand what an account means and build that business logic in there. And DBT has semantic layers. That's one thing that they're pointing to is going to be absolutely critical for that in between of the database and then the analytics layer is that semantic layer. So maybe that's the answer, right? So we still have to have those experts in place, and I think it's going to become more and more important,
Uh-huh.
the next year, 2 year, 3 years, and beyond, where we have folks that have heavy industry knowledge and company knowledge to be able to support good AI within workflows, within their analytics and stuff, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of decisions and data products being made that are going to confuse a lot of people at its best, or at its worst, drive some very bad decision making if it's not done right. So I think that aspect of adding that logic into there is going to be a gap that folks can fill, and I think it can certainly be an opportunity that folks can lean into to raise their hand to be able to be that person. Maybe we can consider that kind of more of a governance role. But I think it's certainly going to be a critical one in the analytics space to be able to enable AI. But yeah, that workflow example, I've already seen it, and it's operating pretty well. And I think there's only going to be more of that. I mean, we're in a good phase 2 if you think about ChatGPT 3.5, and now we're in 4, and 5 or whatever is right around the corner with other
Yeah.
models and stuff catching up as well. I think it'll be surprising how fast it goes, and I think that context is going to be key.
Sure, sure, definitely. You did touch one of the points, right, about understanding your data, like domain, what data you're dealing with,
Yeah.
so that you understand what the AI output is being produced. You are able to resonate with it, right? So that's one of the
Mhm.
point that I was been asked, like how to cultivate that business knowledge within the uh, about your data analytics, right? Because I personally believe
Mhm.
it's one of the key important part when you're creating any analytics projects or working on that, right? So that you understand what's the
Mhm.
business problems, these terminologies and everything. Then only you would be more comfortable to produce something meaningful inside sort of for your stakeholders. How do you see how to cultivate that kind of culture?
Yeah, I think it's super important that it comes from the top in terms of driving that culture. As with most things, we can try to drive that bottoms up, but if it doesn't come from top down, I'm not sure it's going to be that successful. It has to have that motivation either through as a part of, someone's job currently, or potentially new jobs, popping up that maybe is built all around data cataloging. Or I know maybe that doesn't sound thrilling, but it certainly could be depending on the industry and also the impact that you can drive by adding that context to that. I think, the data cataloging space, or folks like data.world, I think do a great job at that kind of thing. I'm trying to think of like a vendor that we could apply to that too.
Yeah,
There's other data observability vendors out there, like your Calibras of the world and stuff that are out there, Relation. All those folks, I think, are building towards the future there, where that type of platform which might be overlooked in the past as something where, yeah, it's a nice to have, but we don't have the budget for that this year, so maybe let's look at that next year. I think it's going to be if it's not already, it's going to become critical that folks have a really good handle on not only the customer field within their data set, but what is the definition of the customer? Like, is it
yeah,
something that can be sociable, where all of a sudden Chaitanya says, hey, I don't think that this customer definition is correct. I see that it's certified by Nick over here. I'm going to reach out to Nick and I'm going to get the logic from him. And we're going to have a quick, Teams chat or a Slack huddle or something like that, where we're going to discuss what it means to be a customer. Is that something that they're using the platform for 3 months in a row? Is it 6 months in a row? Does it mean that they've had an account open with us for more than a year? Like all that kind of stuff, I think is going to be super critical to do that. And I think roles, if they're not existing today, will either be a part of people's roles, and that'll be
yeah.
like a new new responsibility of folks, or it's going to be net new roles in general where folks can, join up on teams and they become that business subject matter expert or SME that we talk about all the time, which is super critical to any engagement for a project to be successful, that we have that.
Correct. So getting that transfer of knowledge about the business along with your technical skills should be the key to success of any analytics project, because that will keep you driving, create more meaningful insights, and also bring your ideas to the table if in case the stakeholders or your customers are not able to think about it, because it will help them to provide some meaningful insights in two ways as well. It's just not driving the analytics, but also sharing your inputs to make the business impactful, to take some decisions as well. Definitely key pointer, whatever you just mentioned, definitely has to be a subject matter expert as we develop these skills from top to the bottom then.
Totally. And those folks, that have those industry skills or that company background, and then you pair that with what's been previously such a blocker. Let's say they've never written SQL in their life or something like that, but you're introducing not only maybe low code tools or platforms, but no code where, it's just, the text, text to a text query, and hopefully you have that like kind of semantic layer in between, that in between space where folks have the industry knowledge, but then they're technical enough to be dangerous and hopefully not too dangerous. Those folks, I think, have the biggest opportunity in this space today, because, if your differentiator is solely that, SQL, you're going to have some tough news in about a year when, everyone can just, draft up a query, and it's not going to be that easy. And, just because someone can create a SQL query or can, do some stuff in dbt does not make one a data engineer by any means. However, I think it does empower those folks that have typically been kind of left behind on that. They're going to be able to catch up, I think, a lot quicker, but they should still have that data fluency component. And I think there's still learnings to be, made by those folks, but I think that gap's going to be closing quickly.
Sure, definitely. Actually, you are almost touching all of my points, which I've got.
I'm getting ahead of myself. I should have read it. Yeah.
No worries, sir. I'm glad. I mean, I don't have to. Okay, but this was the last point, which, in case anyone who's thinking about analytics as a career going forward, right? So, what kind of an advice, since you are been through all this journey of technology change, and we are now, you saw from Excel to AI now, right? So you have been working very closely to the industry now. So, what kind of key skills or any advice you would like to give to any particular individual who is considering analytics right now as a career and can turn into a passion? What kind of advice you would have for them?
Yeah, I think everyone be open to other technologies and platforms. I told you Excel, but I mean, I was still logging into an AS400 when on my first gig saying hello, alt spool underscore Nick and all that kind of stuff. And at the bank, managing COBOL files and piping that into our Oracle database, and using PL SQL and Proc SQL and SAS to translate Proc SQL into PL SQL. Don't tell anybody at my work though that I know PL SQL. I try to keep that a secret, so I'm not staffed on any of those projects. Little word of the rise there for future consultants. My advice, though, in general, just be open to other things. I think you'll be surprised about what you might be working on that might not seem fun, and then 6 months later or 6 years later, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. In terms of that problem. Oh, I actually was the one to raise my hand for a new credit risk migration for Basel risk management, and then all of a sudden 5 years later we're talking about maybe not Basel or Basel Advanced, but maybe we're talking about a different type of regulatory requirement that we need data people to implement or integrate into the business processes. So I think be open. Someone who has aptitude and a great attitude is going to be a very hireable person no matter what. So if you come in there and you SQL and Power BI, and you're applying to a Tableau gig, do some research. Hopefully you have a little time to maybe download Tableau for free, which is free and available to the public. And there's obviously, you're very familiar with building up a portfolio. So just like a designer and an ad agency will have a portfolio that they show their creative directors when they're interviewing for jobs, as data professionals in the data viz space, we want something to show too. I mean, it's skip halfway through to the interview. If you have the person looking at your portfolio, it's on the screen, but they're looking at the portfolio, and they're seeing great visualizations that are, telling a data story, they can skip the first 10 questions and go on to that other thing, which means you're going to have more value, out of the gate in the interview. You're going to be able to get a deeper conversation with the interviewer, hopefully the hiring manager, and just position yourself for the most success there. And, it's not an uncommon thing for people to say you make your own luck. There's definitely nuances to that saying in terms of privilege, in terms of where folks are located, and, just different opportunities. But, everyone would share in the same amount of setting themselves up for success in terms of position yourself with a portfolio, position yourself with a GitHub repo that folks can go tap into, or or pointing to a blog you once wrote, and proving that you can be a thought leader in the space because you've proved it outright, and it's a published, thing on with your company or your personal website and stuff. So getting that stuff catered to the role that you want, I think is super critical too.
Yeah.
And if you want a role in data visualization, but maybe it's only 30% of your job today, highlight how passionate you were about that project in your interview, and make sure that that you're saying, I'm here in the interview because that's only 30% of my job right now, and I want it to be 100%. Call it out point blank that this is a little aspect of my job, and I want it to be the full time part of my job. Or hey, I'm a Power BI person, but maybe I'm coming into this. I got like healthcare domain expertise, and I know you guys use Tableau, but I have the domain expertise and I'm a data visualization expert. Let me apply those skills to now Tableau, or vice versa. Or, Sigma Computing is an emerging great platform as well. Maybe somebody who doesn't have experience on that one because their company just wasn't involved with Sigma Computing yet. So the fact that they know to choose certain chart types over others is going to be already a leapfrog over other candidates who might not have that expertise on that front. So position yourself for success as much as possible. And if you don't know how to do that, leverage, the Sigma community, Tableau, Power BI, leverage those spaces and ask them point blank in a community post, I'm trying to get a job at a healthcare company, being a Tableau data viz. What are your tips? And I think folks would be floored to hear the responses in terms of like folks helping out other folks on that front.
Absolutely. Really great answer to articulate this question. So definitely, I don't want to summarize anything. Whatever Nick says, in case who's looking for this analytics as a career, I request to rewind his answer and just listen point by point. Absolutely making spot on, man.
Thanks.
Cool. Definitely. Well, like I know we are almost on to the time. What I want to say is big thank you for accepting this this invite and jumping on a call.
My pleasure.
Really loved the conversation. Your perspective about analytics, definitely the passion that you have developed should help me as well as some other folks as well who's thinking to pursue in this direction. Any notes you want to wind up before we close out?
I think that might be most of the closing thoughts. Maybe I can shoot you some more information afterwards. We can put that in the show notes or what have you of the YouTube video or wherever folks might be tapping into this.
Sure.
But with that, thanks for the invite, man. Always great catching up with you and chatting data or chatting other things. And yeah, I think folks listening to this video or watching this video, I think are positioned well by having you have some expertise out there for them. So kudos to you for giving back to the community like that.
No, thanks. It's a great pleasure to have you, and definitely exciting to see the responses on this communication or the conversation just we had. Looking forward for that. Yeah. I'm just gonna stop the recording if you don't mind.
Cool.